Every catastrophe begins as a brilliant idea, at least in the head of the person who's about to try it. Welcome to a masterclass in flawed logic, where the final exam is graded by the coroner. This isn't just a list, it's a deep dive into the exact moment where confidence tragically overtook competence. Safety. Brief. These are real stories with fatal outcomes, presented as a stark warning. Don't be the inspiration for our next video. 1. The War Against the Woodpecker that ended with a shocking conclusion is a story that proves nature doesn't have to be big and scary to win. Sometimes, all it takes is a tiny, feathered adversary with a really annoying habit. Our story unfolds on a sprawling farm in Kansas, where a hard-working farmer, let's call him Earl, was engaged in a long, bitter war. His enemy wasn't drought or pests. It was a single, defiant woodpecker. This wasn't just any bird, it was a tiny feathered demon with a jackhammer for a face, and it had decided that Earl's prize-winning, beautifully maintained barn was the most delicious thing it had ever pecked. For weeks, Earl had been woken by the sound, a relentless, maddening, tap-tap-tapping that echoed through the quiet morning air, each peck a personal insult to his craftsmanship. He had tried everything. He put up scarecrows, which the woodpecker used as a perch. He bought a fake plastic owl, which the woodpecker seemed to find amusing. He had even tried yelling at it, which only seemed to encourage the bird. The side of his beautiful red barn was starting to look like Swiss cheese. Finally, Earl reached his breaking point. This was no longer about property damage, this was about pride. He decided it was time to escalate the conflict from nuisance control to active military engagement. He went into his house and came back with his trusty 12-gauge shotgun. His plan was simple. He was going to blast that bird into the next county. But to get a clear shot, he needed a better vantage point. He looked around his yard and saw the perfect solution, a large, empty 55-gallon metal barrel. It was just the right height. He rolled the wobbly barrel into position, not paying any mind to what was directly above it. A series of old, weather-beaten high-voltage power lines that had been there for decades, one of which was visibly frayed from a storm last spring. He climbed onto the barrel, his boots scraping against the metal, the shotgun held at the ready. He stood there, a lone warrior on his metal podium, scanning the barn for his nemesis. And there it was, tapping away, taunting him. Earl raised his shotgun, his eyes locked on the target, his entire world shrinking to that tiny feathered dot. He didn't look up. He didn't consider his surroundings. He was consumed by a singular purpose. He took a deep breath, aimed, and fired. The blast roared across the farm. A cloud of red paint and wood splinters erupted from the side of the barn. But his shot was slightly high. He missed the bird, but a few of the stray pellets from the shotgun shell ripped through the air and struck the old frayed power line directly above his head. For a split second, nothing happened. And then, with a sound like a lightning strike, a brilliant blue-white arc of electricity leaped from the damaged wire down to the nearest, most convenient conductor, the giant metal barrel upon which Earl was standing. The barrel instantly became a critical component in a brand new, very short electrical circuit. The electricity surged through the metal, through Earl's body, and into the ground, a perfect, instantaneous path of least resistance. The woodpecker, startled by the noise, simply flew away, unharmed, probably to find a new, less explosive barn to terrorize. Earl had been so focused on winning his tiny war that he never saw the much larger, more powerful force waiting patiently above him. 2. The Gunstore Heist that suffered from a fatal moment of stage fright is a cautionary tale about the critical importance of follow-through, especially when your brilliant plan involves robbing a place that is, by definition, filled with guns and people who know how to use them. Our scene is a quiet street in Seattle, late at night. Our would-be criminal, a man who probably thought he was the star of his own action movie, decided he was going to rob a gun store. His weapon of choice for this high-stakes endeavor? Not a gun, ironically. A baseball bat. His plan was a masterpiece of brute force and zero finesse. He was going to smash the front door glass, rush in, intimidate the owner, and make off with cash and firearms. He approached the dark storefront, his heart likely hammering against his ribs with a cocktail of fear and adrenaline. He pulled the baseball bat from under his coat, took a mighty swing, and with a satisfying, loud crunch, shattered the reinforced glass of the front door. The first part of his plan was a smashing success. The alarm probably started blaring, but that was part of the thrill. He stood there, framed in the jagged maw of the broken doorway, a dark silhouette ready to make his grand entrance. But then he hesitated. In that critical moment, with the alarm screaming and his entry point secured, he didn't rush in. He froze. Maybe it was the shock of actually going through with it, or maybe he felt the need to perform. Instead of acting, he decided to announce his intentions. He paused dramatically in the doorway and shouted a cliché, movie villain line like, "Everybody get down! This is a robbery!" This pause, this single moment of theatricality, was his fatal mistake. Inside, the store owner, a man who likely spent his days surrounded by firearms and his nights mentally rehearsing for this exact scenario, was not panicking. He didn't need to be told what was happening. The sound of shattering glass was his cue. While our thief was busy auditioning for a role he would never get to finish, the owner was already moving. Calmly, professionally, he drew his own pistol from beneath the counter, took aim at the clear, stationary target conveniently framed in the doorway, and fired a single, decisive shot. The bullet struck the robber square in the chest. He collapsed on the spot, his baseball bat clattering uselessly to the ground. He died right there in the doorway, halfway between the street and the score he would never reach. His big, dramatic entrance had given the store owner all the time in the world to write a very abrupt and final ending to his script. He had the perfect plan for breaking in, but absolutely no idea what to do once he got there. 3. The Firecracker, the Dog, and the final game of Fetch is a story that delivers a powerful, multi-layered lesson. Never underestimate the loyalty of a good dog. And never, ever store your open gasoline cans next to your designated scare the birds away zone. Our scene unfolds on a peaceful farm in rural China. Our protagonist, a farmer, was having a classic agricultural problem: birds. A flock of them had descended upon his crops, and they were having an absolute feast. He needed to scare them off, but he wasn't the kind of guy to just clap his hands or set up a scarecrow. He needed a solution with a bit more authority. He decided to use a firecracker. And we're not talking about some little firecracker you'd get for New Year's. This was a giant, industrial-strength firecracker, the kind that makes a sound like a cannon going off, designed to scare away anything with a pulse within a 5-mile radius. His plan was simple: light it, throw it, and watch the birds scatter in terror. With him on the farm that day was his loyal dog, a happy, energetic creature whose entire world revolved around pleasing his owner and playing fetch. The farmer, completely oblivious to the impending disaster, lit the long fuse on the massive firecracker. It started to hiss and sputter, a promise of the loud bang to come. He reared back, and with a mighty throw he launched the burning explosive high into the air over his fields. The dog, watching from nearby, saw this as the greatest moment of its life. To its simple, loving brain, its owner had just thrown the most amazing, most exciting, most delightfully noisy stick it had ever seen. This was a new game. A better game of fetch. Its tail started to wag furiously. With a joyful bark, the dog shot off like a rocket, its eyes locked on the sputtering firecracker as it fell to the earth. The farmer probably watched, a horrified "oh no" dawning on his face. He started screaming at the dog, "No, stop, bad dog!" But the dog, hearing the excited shouts, just thought he was being cheered on. It reached the still-burning firecracker, snatched it gently in its mouth, and with the immense pride of a dog who has just completed the best retrieve of its life, it turned and sprinted back towards its beloved owner. It trotted happily up to the farmer and dropped the hissing, rapidly shortening explosive right at his feet. The farmer, in a moment of pure, instinctual panic, lunged to grab the firecracker, probably to throw it as far away as possible. But in his frantic dive, he tripped. He stumbled, knocking over a large, open can of gasoline that he had been using for his farm equipment earlier that day, which was sitting, with incredible, world-class bad luck, right next to him. The still-lit firecracker fell out of his hand and landed with a gentle plink directly into the open gasoline can. For a split second, there was probably a profound, almost comical silence. And then, the gasoline vapors ignited. The resulting explosion wasn't just a bang. It was a massive, fiery detonation that instantly vaporized the farmer and a good portion of his farm. The dog, who had been a few feet away, was startled by the noise but otherwise unharmed. It probably just sat there, confused, wondering why the fun new game had ended so abruptly. The farmer had wanted to scare away some birds, but ended up learning a brutal lesson in the dangers of combining explosives, flammable liquids, and the unwavering and sometimes fatal loyalty of man's best friend. 4. The fishing trip that went down, and stayed down, is a cautionary tale about the dangers of loving your fishing rod a little too much, and a grim physics lesson in buoyancy, or the complete lack thereof. Our story takes place at a fishing contest in Belarus, on the banks of a wide, deep river. Our hero is a passionate fisherman, a man who lived for the thrill of the catch. He was decked out in all the gear, a fancy rod and reel, a tackle box full of lures, and, most importantly for our story, a pair of heavy-duty, chest-high fishing waders. These are essentially waterproof overalls that let you stand in the water without getting wet, a must-have for any serious angler. The contest was in full swing, and our fisherman was in the zone. He cast his line out into the current, his focus absolute. And then, he got a bite. A big one. The tip of his rod bent double. The line screamed off the reel. This was it. This was the prize winner. He fought the fish with all his might, a dramatic, silent battle between man and beast. But in the heat of the moment, as he was wrestling with his unseen foe, his grip slipped. The expensive, state-of-the-art fishing rod, his pride and joy, was ripped from his hands and sailed into the middle of the river, where it started to drift away with the current. Our fisherman watched in horror. That wasn't just a fishing rod. That was an extension of his soul. It was his baby. He couldn't lose it. In a split-second decision fueled by pure, unadulterated panic, he decided he was going in after it. He didn't think. He just acted. He took a running start and dove, head first, into the deep, cold river. He probably imagined a heroic, graceful dive, a quick swim to retrieve his beloved rod, and a triumphant return to the shore. But he had completely forgotten about the most critical piece of equipment he was wearing, his chest-high waders. The moment he hit the water, the massive open tops of the waders acted like two giant buckets. They instantly flooded with gallons and gallons of heavy river water. His waterproof, buoyant fishing gear was suddenly transformed into a pair of concrete boots. He didn't float. He didn't swim. He just sank. The immense weight of the water trapped in his waders dragged him straight down to the deep river bottom like an anchor. He probably struggled for a moment in the murky darkness, tangled in his own life-saving equipment, trying to kick his way to the surface. But it was impossible. He was hopelessly, fatally weighed down. The other contestants on the shore probably just saw him dive in and disappear, never to resurface. He had been so terrified of losing his expensive fishing rod that he ended up losing everything else. It's a dark and very wet reminder that sometimes it's better to just let things go, especially when you're wearing an outfit that can turn into a personal submarine with no way back up. 5. The heist that went down the toilet, literally, is a story that proves the importance of knowing what you're drilling into, especially when your target is a large, mysterious tank on the underside of a vehicle. Our scene is a poorly ventilated, cluttered garage in Washington State. Our protagonist is a teenager, a young man with a surplus of confidence and a critical deficit of common sense. He decided he was going to siphon some gasoline, a classic, time-honored tradition for people who want to drive but don't want to pay. His target was a large, luxurious motorhome parked next to his house. It was a giant, rolling treasure chest of free fuel just waiting to be tapped. He had his tools, a drill and a length of rubber hose. His plan was simple and direct. He wasn't going to bother trying to pick the lock on the gas cap. He was just going to drill a new hole directly into the bottom of the fuel tank. Quick, efficient, and wonderfully destructive. He slid under the massive RV, the concrete floor cold against his back. He looked up at the undercarriage, a complex maze of pipes and tanks. He saw a large plastic tank that looked about right, and without a moment's hesitation, he positioned the tip of his drill and hit the power button. The drill bit began to whine, biting into the plastic. He probably felt a surge of illicit excitement. the thrill of the heist just moments away from success. But our young thief had made a catastrophic error in identification. He was not drilling into the fuel tank. He had, with incredible world-class bad luck, chosen to drill into the motorhome's septic tank, the Blackwater holding tank, the onboard sewage system. As the drill bit finally punctured the plastic, it wasn't gasoline that began to hiss out. It was a highly concentrated, incredibly potent cloud of methane-rich gas, the byproduct of weeks of decomposing human waste. This invisible, highly flammable gas began to fill the small, poorly ventilated garage, silently, invisibly. Our thief, still under the RV, probably smelled something foul, but was too focused on his task to think much of it. He kept drilling, trying to widen the hole. And that's when the second part of the disaster kicked in. The friction from the metal drill bit scraping against the plastic created a tiny, almost insignificant spark. But in a room now saturated with pure methane, a tiny spark is all you need. The vapor cloud ignited. The result wasn't just a fire, it was a flash explosion, a sudden, violent detonation that engulfed the entire garage in a ball of blue flame. The force of the blast was immense, and for our thief, lying directly at ground zero, it was instantaneous. He had wanted to steal a few gallons of gasoline, but instead, he had successfully liberated the contents of a septic tank and then ignited them with a power tool. It's a uniquely disgusting and explosive reminder that if you're going to drill into a random tank, you should probably be prepared for the contents to be something other than what you expected. 6. The history lesson that was tragically hands-on is a story that serves as a powerful warning to all antique collectors and history buffs. Some artifacts are best left admired from a distance, especially the ones designed to explode. Our protagonist is a history buff, a man who loved the American Civil War. He collected uniforms, read books, and probably spent his weekends at reenactments. He had a deep respect for the past. One day, he acquired the ultimate prize for his collection, an authentic Civil War-era cannonball. It was a heavy cast-iron sphere, a genuine piece of history that had once flown across a battlefield. He was ecstatic. He polished it, displayed it, and probably bored his friends to tears with stories about the battle it might have been in. But his curiosity got the better of him. He wasn't content to just look at it. He wanted to know what was inside. Was it solid shot? Did it still contain its original black powder charge? He decided he needed to find out. He was going to perform a little historical investigation. A normal person might take it to a museum or a bomb squad. But our hero was a hands-on kind of guy. He decided he would just drill a small inspection hole. He took his priceless and potentially very dangerous artifact into his workshop and mounted it securely in his drill press. He selected a sturdy metal drill bit, lined it up perfectly with the center of the cannonball, and switched on the machine. The drill press hummed to life, and the bit began its slow, steady descent into the thick, cast-iron shell. He probably watched with fascination, the metal shavings curling away, feeling like an archaeologist on the verge of a great discovery. What our intrepid historian had failed to consider is that 150-year-old black powder, while old, is not necessarily inert, and it has a very low ignition temperature. The friction from the metal drill bit grinding against the iron casing began to generate an immense amount of heat. The cannonball, which had sat dormant for over a century, silently waiting, suddenly found the spark it had been missing. The ancient black powder inside detonated. The cannonball didn't just crack. It exploded with the full, violent force it was designed to unleash on a battlefield. The workshop was rocked by a massive blast, sending a deadly storm of iron shrapnel in every direction. Our hero, standing directly over his experiment, received the full force of the explosion. He had wanted to take a peek inside a piece of history, and in a way, he succeeded. He became a part of it. His quest for knowledge had a very loud, very final, and very messy conclusion. It's a grim reminder that some historical artifacts are best left unopened, especially the ones that were specifically designed to blow things up. 7. The phone call that he was dying to answer is a story that serves as a brutal, wood-chipped lesson in the importance of turning things off before you stick your hand in them. Our scene is a quiet, leafy suburb in Georgia. Our protagonist is a landscaper, a hard-working guy named Dave, who was spending his afternoon turning a massive pile of tree branches into a neat little pile of mulch. His primary tool for this task was a large, industrial-strength wood chipper. This wasn't some small garden shredder. This was a roaring, diesel-powered beast with a ravenous appetite, a machine designed to grab anything that comes near it and pulverize it into tiny pieces with a set of brutally efficient rotating blades. Dave was in the zone, feeding branches into the chute, the machine chewing them up with a satisfying roar. As he was working, he heard a familiar, cheerful jingle. His cell phone was ringing. He patted his pockets. Nothing. And then he heard it again, a muffled electronic tune coming from deep within the roaring, churning guts of the wood chipper. He must have realized with a sickening lurch that his phone had slipped out of his pocket and fallen into the machine's intake chute, probably carried in with a load of leaves and small branches. Now, a person with a healthy sense of self-preservation would have done one thing: write off the phone as a loss. It's gone, man. Time for an upgrade. But Dave was not that person. He saw his expensive smartphone, his connection to the world, being slowly drawn towards certain doom, and he decided he was going to stage a rescue mission. His logic was simple, direct, and catastrophically flawed. He thought, I can be quick. I can just reach in, grab it before it hits the blades, and pull it out. It'll only take a second. He didn't turn the machine off. That would take too much time. He just leaned over the wide, vibrating chute, peered into the noisy, dangerous darkness, and plunged his hand in. He was reaching for his phone, a heroic, last-ditch effort to save his digital life. But the machine he was fighting was designed for one purpose: to grab and pull. The instant his fingertips entered the danger zone, the powerful feeding mechanism caught his glove. It didn't just tug, it yanked. With the force of a powerful animal, it pulled his entire arm into the chute before his brain could even process what was happening. There was no time to scream, no time to react. The rotating blades, which had been happily chewing on oak branches all day, were suddenly presented with something much softer. He had thought he could beat the machine, that he could be faster than the blades. But the machine doesn't get tired, it doesn't hesitate, and it always wins. He had been so determined to save his phone from being destroyed that he ended up paying for it with everything he had. 8. The ice cream truck driver who served up one final bitter lesson is a story that proves sometimes the sweetest job in the world can have the sourest ending. Our story takes place on a hot summer day in a quiet American suburb. Our protagonist is an ice cream truck driver. He should have been a figure of pure joy, a bringer of frozen treats and happy childhood memories. But on this day, he was just an angry man in a truck that played annoying music. He got into a heated argument with a child. We don't know what it was about. Maybe the kid was short on change. Maybe he complained about the size of his scoop. Whatever the reason, our driver lost his cool. In a fit of pure, unprofessional rage, he decided he had had enough. He slammed the service window shut, threw the truck into gear, and sped off, leaving a very confused and probably very sad child standing on the curb. But he wasn't done. As he was driving away, he leaned his head far out the driver's side window to shout one last parting insult at the kid. He was probably yelling something heroic like, "And you can forget about extra sprinkles next time." He was so consumed by his victory in this argument against a 10-year-old, so focused on getting the last word, that he failed to notice his surroundings. He was so busy looking backward at the child he had just vanquished that he didn't see what was directly in front of him. Specifically, a very large, very low-hanging oak branch that stretched out over the street. The truck passed directly under it. The branch, thick and unyielding, did not break. It did not bend. It connected squarely with our driver's outstretched neck with the force of a clothesline from hell. The impact was instantaneous and absolutely final. The ice cream truck, now without a driver, continued to coast slowly down the street, its cheerful jingle still playing, a bizarre, mobile funeral dirge, before gently rolling to a stop against a fire hydrant. The child was unharmed. The ice cream was fine. But the driver, in his desperate need to win a petty argument, had met a swift and brutally ironic end. He had been so focused on yelling at a child that he was taken out by a completely silent, stationary, and very sturdy tree. It's a grim reminder to always watch where you're going, especially when you're angry. 9. The brilliant idea that shed a little too much light on the problem is a story that should be required reading for anyone who has ever thought, I can probably fix this myself. Our scene is a quiet suburban driveway. Our hero, a man who probably considered himself a pretty decent amateur mechanic, noticed a dark puddle forming under his car. It had the distinct, unmistakable smell of gasoline. He had a fuel leak. Now, a cautious person might call a tow truck. A slightly less cautious person might try to identify the source of the leak in broad daylight. But our hero was working at night, and he was a man of immediate, direct action. He needed to see where the leak was coming from, and he needed to see it now. He slid under the car, the cool concrete a stark contrast to the growing sense of unease. It was dark under there, a maze of pipes and metal parts. He couldn't see a thing. He needed a light source. He patted his pockets. No flashlight. But he did have a lighter, a simple plastic butane lighter. And in that moment, his brain, completely bypassing every safety instinct and basic chemistry lesson he had ever learned, came up with a solution of such breathtaking, incandescent stupidity, it almost feels like performance art. He decided he would use the open flame of the lighter to get a better look at the gasoline leak. Let that sink in. He was going to introduce a naked flame into an environment saturated with highly flammable gasoline fumes. What he didn't realize was that the gasoline vapor, being heavier than air, hadn't just dispersed. It had pooled under the car, creating an invisible, highly explosive cloud, just waiting for a spark. He lay there under the 2-ton vehicle, flicked the flint wheel, and a tiny, cheerful orange flame sprang to life. It was probably just enough light for him to see the steady drip, drip, drip from the fuel line. He probably thought, aha, found it. And in that exact instant, the tiny flame found the vapor cloud. The result was not a small fire. It was a massive, instantaneous fireball, a whoomph of explosive force that engulfed him and the entire car in a searing wave of heat and flame. The car was instantly transformed into a burning pyre, and he, lying directly at ground zero, never stood a chance. The fire department arrived to a scene of utter devastation, a burnt-out shell of a car and a tragic testament to a man who had successfully diagnosed his fuel leak. He just used a diagnostic tool that had a 100% chance of making the problem infinitely and fatally worse. It's a grim and very warm reminder that when you smell gas, the absolute last thing you should ever reach for is a lighter. 10. The lottery winner who went out with a bang is a beautiful, tragic, and incredibly loud story about a man who had just achieved the dream of a lifetime, and then immediately found the most spectacular way possible to cancel his own winnings. Our story begins in Belgium, where a man had just won the lottery. We're not talking about a few $100 on a scratch ticket. This was a life-changing, quit your job and buy a private island kind of jackpot. He was set for life. He was ecstatic, overjoyed, a man on top of the world. He decided he needed to celebrate this momentous occasion in a manner befitting his new millionaire status. He wasn't just going to pop a bottle of champagne. That was for peasants. He was going to put on a fireworks show. And he didn't buy some dinky little fireworks from the corner store. He used his newfound wealth to acquire a massive, commercial-grade, 2-kilogram rocket firework. This was the kind of firework they use in professional displays, the kind that shoots hundreds of feet into the air and explodes into a glittering canopy of light that can be seen for miles. It was a firework worthy of a lottery winner. Now, these powerful fireworks are designed to be launched from a sturdy, heavy-duty mortar tube, which is firmly planted on the ground to direct the immense thrust safely upwards. But our hero, in his euphoric, "I'm a millionaire, the rules don't apply to me" state of mind, decided that safety tubes were an unnecessary hassle. They were for other people. He was going to launch this rocket personally. He gathered his friends and family in his backyard to witness his glorious celebration. He held the 2-kilogram rocket, which was essentially a small missile, in his hands. But he wasn't going to hold it away from his body. No, that wouldn't be dramatic enough. He held it directly against his chest, pointing it towards the heavens, as if he were presenting an offering to the gods of fortune. He was going to become the launch pad. With a triumphant grin on his face, he lit the long fuse. It hissed to life, a brilliant shower of sparks. His friends cheered. This was going to be epic. And then, the rocket ignited. The immense, instantaneous thrust of the powerful motor didn't just push the rocket upwards, it pushed it downwards first, directly into his chest. Before the rocket even had a chance to go up, its incredible force drove the entire 2-kilogram device straight through his torso, turning him into a human mortar tube. The rocket then continued its journey, launching high into the night sky and exploding in a beautiful, dazzling display of colorful stars. His friends and family stood below, watching the spectacular fireworks display, their cheers turning to horrified screams as they realized what had just happened. He had celebrated his newfound wealth by turning himself into the launch pad for his own funeral pyre. He had won the lottery, a 1 in a million shot, only to be taken out by a 1 in a million act of pure, celebratory stupidity. All right, you've seen the failures. Now you're the expert. Pick one story from today's list and tell us the single, simple thing that person could have done to survive. Besides, not being an idiot. Let's see who's got the best survival instincts in the comments. If this video sharpened your own, hit like. Subscribe so you never miss a lesson from the University of Bad Ideas.